Hey Christian, what's up?
What up, dude?
Sorry, one sec. Let me. I think I can already hear you from my monitor. So, yep.
All right, cool. Awesome, man. I'm just getting everything set up here. Otter for some reason. Here, let me pull this up. There we go. Very good. Cool. We'll son of again. All right, cool. So I'm like super excited for this. I think this is gonna be really fun.
Fantastic.
So I mean, here's basically what I was thinking. Like let's see if this thing's actually working now. There we go. Okay, cool. So you and I have been at this for a little while, right?
Yep.
We do good AI stuff, very much like operating on the frontier. And at least from my perspective, one of the things that I've found to be the case is it's very difficult, I think, to explain to people in the abstract. Like you can explain it, but to convey like the right information about what this means for somebody's business or their workflow or whatever else, like using, whatever, like a playbook or terms. Like it's not to say that that doesn't exist, and that's kind of stuff that we're working on as we learn. But like in general, show don't tell, and then I like to say like don't show. Like actually get people like to do the thing until they have the magic moment is sort of the right way to go. On top of that, content wise, have a lot of fun posting on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever else. But the content I found to be the most seems to be the most compelling, highly engaged with. I get a lot of people who reach out after the fact are just like demonstrations of little workflow things.
Okay, great.
Because you're sort of like making things concrete. What I was thinking today is we could combine forces to do something like this, like collaborate on kind of this nano hackathon. You had some ideas, I had some ideas within, a relatively constrained time period, like 50 minutes, sprint towards it, get stuff done. And then ideally we've produced something where we can just like post it. Like we have that, in our content thing, right? It's like, hey, we did something amazing. We did it under conditions of uncertainty. This gives you a sense of what the technology can do. And it's like kind of fun, honestly. I love doing this.
Yeah, no, agreed.
So that's what I was thinking is set an outcome, talk through the ingredients, keep in mind that like the idea would be that we would post this in full. So we can hire an editor, like find somebody on Discord or whatever, but best case we just get it right in the first take and then decide if we want to post it.
Perfect. Yeah, I agree with you.
All right. Nice. All right. So talked about kind of the meta outcome there. What are we gonna build, man? What are we gonna do today?
So I already have a demo in place.
You already did it.
Well, we can listen. Let's talk through it. I'm not married to any of the ideas. I'd love to get your perspective, and we'll make edits and tweaks where needed, or we can go in a completely different direction if we also feel like kind of whatever I built doesn't serve the purpose.
No, 100%. So let's start there. I guess what would be really helpful is could you tell me about the nature of the problem?
Sure.
You're seeking to solve.
Right. So essentially, one thing that I struggle with is just keeping abreast of basically all the developments in AI, just because things are moving at the speed of light. It seems like, and there's a few places that I usually go to for information. Like there's a few blogs that I usually keep up with, some people on Twitter, just websites, YouTube channels, what have you.
Yep.
And one thing that would be great in terms of being able to first read, distill, stay abreast of all developments, but also be able to create content and keep my followers abreast as well, would be to if we were able to at least automate part of this process of like reading, processing, posting.
Yeah.
So that's the pipeline the way I see it.
So would it be fair to say that like there are a bajillion different new bits of data that are being generated kind of in the AI space, And right now, like all the intermediate steps basically to get from Twitter, YouTube, whatever else, like all of this stuff is there's a lot of reading, writing, decision making, discerning of like quality and all that kind of, it's just like very cognitively taxing.
Exactly. 100%.
And what are all the sources? So you said YouTube, Twitter, what else?
It's called online blogs.
Blogs. Okay. Any others or?
Pretty much, I think that pretty much covers it.
Cool.
Can you think of something else? What do you use?
Yeah, I use, so for me, like podcasts.
Sure.
Podcasts and like long form recent YouTube videos have kind of been my secret weapon.
Okay.
So I'll just like account for those like podcasts, and the other one is like private chat groups, which has been really interesting. Like I've noticed that a lot of the quality discourse sort of like retreats to smaller groups.
Yep.
That are kind of informal. So
Yeah.
that's where a lot of my information from. I've tried signing up for memberships at some of like the paid Slack communities and things like that.
Okay.
Like this problem of like at a certain scale is just like very hard to maintain quality. So my experience has been a little so-so with those, but just like informal, like Signal, Twitter groups, like whatever. Usually starts here, and then like finding thought partners in there like gives me really good info. So that's kind of been the case, and there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with AI and podcasts and so on and so forth. But all right, so this is all coming in, and then the idea is on the other side of this, like you are, let's say, meaningful contribution to the conversation, basically, right? So
pretty much
there's then this process where you're like producing something, and then that gets like redistributed through whatever the appropriate channel is.
Yep.
Cool. And then that attracts, I don't know, attention. Maybe you work with people to figure things out.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was on. Yep. That's what was on my mind.
Awesome. All right. So yeah, there are a million different places where you can insert AI in this, right? And then it sounds like you already have. So so I guess the problem is huge volume of information, want to produce something high quality, but probably also differentiated, engaging. Like there are all these different things that would make this particular artifact at the end useful and good. And the question is, how can we slice up all the different little bits of the workflow all the way through, prudently delegate to large language models or some kind of like main or such that you can increase throughput while also maintaining quality.
Perfect. Yep.
So what'd you build?
All right. So I think the way I would start thinking about this is at the sources level, right? Because information needs to be collected, I guess. And there's different modalities that we're talking about here. There's video, audio, and there's text.
Yep.
And some of the stuff, you know, has APIs. I think pretty much everything here has APIs.
Yep.
So YouTube has an API, Twitter does, blogs. You can pretty much scrape if it's you know, depending on what, you know, people allow you, but mostly they're gonna have lax policies if they're trying to post about like some sort of technology. So you can probably scrape that, no problem. Mm-hmm. The private group stuff is, you know, that's where you get into kind of more complicated territory there with podcasts as well. So one thing I was thinking of yesterday, and this is kind of where things started, is the LangChain blog, which is a blog that I find myself, you know, going back to pretty often, just because LangChain is one of the frameworks that I use a lot on a day-to-day.
Yeah.
And I find that they've made like a lot of changes to LangChain ever since they started, and they produce interesting, you know, content on agents, on retrieval augmented generation, and other just technical aspects of kind of how to build with LLMs and Gen AI. So they have a very interesting blog. I was able to scrape it, and maybe we can talk through what that, you know, what that entailed. Mm-hmm. But the general idea with scraping, the general challenge, and I've done quite a bit of scraping, is one, you got to make sure you're allowed to scrape what you want to scrape. Usually there's a robots.txt file that tells you you're allowed to scrape this versus you're not allowed to scrape that.
Sure.
Sometimes there's, if you're not allowed, then you shouldn't, but there's security barriers that actually prevent you from doing that.
Okay.
But let's say, you've gotten past that and you're actually allowed to scrape said blog or said web page. You got to make sure that the content that you do get out of the page can be processed meaningfully by an LLM, right? Because there's going to be a bunch of like HTML tags there, a bunch of text that's just gibberish, that LLMs, I mean, they can probably make sense of it, but it's too much information for what you're trying to get across. It's like you're adding unnecessary stuff. Right. And so one thing that I've there's a company that I found on the internet. They're called Firecrawl, and basically their one job is, you give us the URL, and we're going to parse the information on the page for you, and return it to you on Markdown, which is a language that the LLMs are going to be able to process more easily.
Okay.
So that's kind of where I started. Scraping the blog, using Firecrawl, exactly. Getting back the Markdown. And by the way, so Firecrawl makes it very easy for you to scrape or to crawl the entire website. So you could just give it the top URL for the blog, and what it'll do is it'll find basically all the links on the page and follow them. And so you get, I think for LangChain blog, I think yesterday I got about 230 links of potential articles. Like some of them aren't actually articles, but most of them are.
Okay. Take a look at this in real time. I'm just kind of curious.
Yep.
Cool. So basically, you scrape the single URL, and then you were saying the crawl, it'll go to the sub pages.
Exactly.
That's pretty
yeah, it's sick, right? And you get a bunch of metadata as well.
Okay.
That tells you kind of what the URL is, when it was scraped. I think it has a title. So I think in the process of like building this, if you want to call it agentic workflow, start with the scraping, and that in my mind is outside of the workflow because it happens regardless. Usually like when I'm trying to assign a task to an agent, I'm thinking like, is there some sort of reasoning that goes into the step? Does the agent need to pick a tool to use or not? And for the scraping part, I find that the answer for that is no. So I keep that outside of the agentic workflow. I do my scraping. I feed that output of Firecrawl into the agentic workflow. And then I have the agent, I think step one, determine whether this is an article, right? That's the most obvious thing. Like, is this a scientific article, or is this an about page for LangChain, right?
Interesting.
That's
so you're doing basically like a Boolean at that point.
Pretty much, right?
So here's a question for you on that, because this is maybe we'll go into this as well. This is related to something that I'm working on. Is like if that Boolean determination works well enough.
Yeah.
Because GPT-4o mini, or like now with the Sonnet 3.5 caching and whatever, although I don't know if it would work that well for caching, but whatever, like the cost of some of these models is dropping tremendously, which means that you can scale up use to ridiculous levels.
Exactly.
And so I was wondering about this, like, does it work well enough that you could scale this up now from going from like 10 pages to like 10 million in like a single go, and it costs you $1 or something, right? Like,
yes. So
it does work well enough. Is that?
So wait, so there's a couple, I think, nuances I want to make.
Sure,
I think from a financial perspective and just cost wise, I think it depends on what you're trying to do, but it could get like prohibitively expensive. So like, for example, if you were quote unquote like crawling a website, You don't know how many sub URLs there's going to be.
Yeah.
So I think the cost starts at like the Firebase level, because they will charge you, I think, per URL that you scrape.
Oh,
so
okay.
So if you like point them to a page where there's like 10,000 sub URLs, then the cost starts there, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously, downstream you have the LLMs that are processing whatever information you're giving them. So that cost scales as well with the number of pages. And if you have different steps for, first step being, for example, like determining whether this is even a worthwhile article to process or to summarize or to create content from, then every level that you add is essentially adding cost.
Right. Well, so that's kind of the interesting thing, right? Like the way that this is starting to like look as like a general pattern in my head, because I built something a while ago that essentially so I would take a conversation I just had.
Yep.
And I had a developer who I work with build this little web app where I just copy and paste the transcript from Otter or Fireflies or whatever into it. And I had actually uploaded all of my LinkedIn contacts. Before. You can download them from LinkedIn. Problem is, you can't really get it programmatically, but you could probably do this with a CRM or something. And we looked at the cost of comparing conversation to like all the profile information about every single person using like GPT-4 Turbo, and to determine, should I make an introduction, basically.
Right.
And the cost of doing that was like, it was like $700 like per run.
Right.
And so that's where you get into this engineering part where, okay, least expensive would be like vectorization and like a naive like cosine similarity search, right?
Yeah, that's probably the way I would go. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can start with that. And then it's like, okay, there's some sampling of, you can rank order it by, the way we did it was like ideal persona that was generated by a big model, and then looked at the vector of the person who would be good to introduce this person to given their challenges that are in the transcript, and then look at the vectorized representation, and then the vectorized representation of all the contacts that I had with like all the enriched profile data and whatever else, rank order that. And then I think we sampled, it was like the whoops, I think I dropped out for a second.
Yeah. I can hear you.
Yeah. So what we did is the GPT 3.5 took every single one of those profiles, and we just put a prompt in. It was like, how likely would this person be to be a good intro? Let's think it through step by step. Get to the right answer. JSON output, reasoning, probability score. Re-rank it again. Sample the top 10%, and then feed that through the most powerful model. Yep. Which you can either do another re-ranker if you want to get crazy about it, or you just have it turned into very specific recommendations. So it's like the output is essentially, here are the top 5 profiles, and here's why it would be a good intro, and here's how you could start the conversation. And so it was like this kind of like nested thing to go from like global search to getting like really focused, and then using the most powerful model to help you take the right next action.
Nice. So when did you do this, Christian? How
I did this a while. It was a while ago. Like it was, I want to say it was like, when did GPT-4 Turbo come out? I think it was late last year or something, right?
Yeah, I think so. So
it must have been like December, January, something like that.
So what I'm trying to get at is costs have come down significantly since then, right? Exactly. Especially with 4.0 mini being at like, I think 33 times cheaper than GPT-4o. So your $700 bill will cost you around like 21 bucks today. So completely different economics.
Right. And so this is where it gets interesting. Like my, business brain or whatever starts going, is you start thinking, okay, if you can start getting hits, depending on the type of search that you're doing, right? Like what is the desired outcome that you're trying to get to? And so from that, it was, can I make facilitate fruitful connections that I never would have thought to otherwise?
Yep.
And the if it works consistently, the value of that is quite high, right? And so it becomes worth it maybe that you spend $20 each time. Now, what I found in practice, the reason why I didn't sort of continue using it was it didn't work as well as like it was like maybe once every 2 weeks something would come up where I go, oh yeah, maybe that's a good connection. And then it wasn't, you know, it didn't get as integrated into my workflow as I would have hoped. So that's why we stopped working on it. And also getting updated LinkedIn data is like kind of a pain, but like in general, you know, coming back to this, there's this interesting question. We'll go into like some of the more details, but I think like, okay, this final outcome of making a meaningful contribution to the conversation, if that's contingent upon you teasing out these like really rare nuggets of insight, but each nugget of insight that you get is like makes it significantly more valuable,
Yeah.
then there probably are cases where you're like, man, I would pay huge amounts each time because it's going to be useful for like attracting the right attention or something like that. That's like this very high quality thing where you're thinking now in terms of needle in a haystack type search, I guess would be the way to think about it.
Right. And I think search is just in general is very, very difficult. So what you were trying to do with like vectorization, I mean, it depends on the amount of text that you're trying to embed and then search against. It depends on the model that you're trying to use to do the embedding. Like just from a technical perspective, that's a very, very hard problem to solve. And I believe that might have been why, you know, you didn't get the results that you may have, you know, been expecting. It's just a very tough problem. Like a lot of very smart engineers spend a lot of their time every day trying to solve this.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's probably true. The other thing I just realized though was like, oh, like I actually kind of know my LinkedIn network like relatively well. So I was going to make a lot of those connections anyway.
Yourself?
So, yeah. Now, if you have like a giant, you know, you're searching all of LinkedIn or something like that, right? It's not, you know, I don't know. I don't have to go too much on a tangent, but like just getting back to your thing, like this step of determining is the content relevant, given that you make the meaningful contribution. That's something where one of these really cheap models, you can run it, but you got to be mindful of cost where, like you said, even if that part of it is cheap, the economic complement or whatever, which is the service that retrieves it in the first place,
yes,
maybe that may make it prohibitively expensive to scale up.
There's another thing that I was thinking about in terms of cost. If you scrape a certain page, you might not want to scrape it again, right? So like for because the information is there, right? Yeah. And I'm not sure how you would do that with Firecrawl, if there's a way for you to do that. My assumption would be no. But for example, if Firecrawl to the LangChain blog, for example, and you were to say, you know, crawl this, you get 230 hits. Every time you crawl, you're going to get the same hits. You might get 1 or 2 additional articles, but you're spending all that money basically to do the, you know, the crawling. So maybe you crawl the first time, and then you got to maybe think of a, you know, clever way of, you know, potentially building a tool that does just plain old scraping, like regular, like checks the website, sees if there are any new links. But this, I mean, for this demo, I'm not sure we want to concern ourselves with that so much. But yeah, so save the things that I've already scraped, because I don't want to basically pay Firecrawl to scrape the exact same data, especially if I'm crawling.
So it would be fair to say that, like, from an engineering perspective, you want to, at some point, like, there are ways in the future that you could do some kind of caching thing or something, or check to see if the data is not fresh.
Yeah, exactly. So you may want to, you know, store it in a database where your unique ID is the URL. So if you've visited the URL before, it's not going to override that. So that's kind of that's another thing to think about. But that, yeah, I think going back to the workflow. So is this content relevant? And then if the answer to that is no, then obviously move on to the next thing, or stop the workflow. And if the content is indeed relevant, then what you want to do is, do you want to summarize it? Like, here's kind of what I was thinking is, write like a draft of a post potentially. It could be a summary.
So okay, so this is really interesting. So the question is, like, once you've determined that, I guess the way you can think, the way I found it useful to think about this stuff is like, if you had infinite time, right, and you could just like clone yourself, and you had all the time in the world, like, is this a piece of content that you would be better off for somehow consuming, right?
Sure.
Now, in the context of what you want to do, it's, you also want to interact with it in some way, or use it to create something new, or to like engage with it.
Yeah.
So there's kind of more to it, and we can talk about that. But yeah, it's yeah. Is this something that I would read if I had infinite time? And then what do you do? And that's where I think it actually gets a little bit complicated, because like what I've seen, and this drives me a little bit crazy, and I've posted on this on like LinkedIn and some other places. I think there are people who are, and startups and stuff, that are like taking the shortcut, which is create some like, you know, yeah, like kind of like, it's just like spam generators, like, you're right. And that's not to say that the technology, like, I think if you get all this information and you aggregate it, turn it into some kind of digest, that in and of itself could be really useful. But if you want to take it to the next level, how do you then use AI to facilitate you to think about things at a deeper level, and like actually come to terms and contend with the core material, so that you're not just regurgitating stuff, you're making something new. Yeah.
I hear you. I think the way I think about it is like, you know, you could either, you know, spend the time to read all the articles that are out there. You could hire a ghostwriter, you know, point them towards, you know, certain resources that you would read and you would write about, and you would ask them to of something, and you would kind of read it and just give it the green light or not. You know, that's one workflow that you know, I think has existed even before the LLM. I would echo your sentiment about spam on the internet. I've you know, starting to see way more. I absolutely hate it. The way I think to, you know, get around that is, and so when I talk about spam, what I really mean here is like content that sounds like an AI wrote it, and it just sounds like there's no added value, there's no thinking, there's nothing, you know, too deep. There's no insight that was provided. There's nothing like that. I think the way you potentially get around that is potentially you use more than one source. You try to triangulate. You ask your LLM to write in your voice, and you provide a number of examples. And then I think the most important thing is you don't get it to post automatically, right? That's the key thing.
Yep. Absolutely. So there is a path where you could just go from this to write a post draft, and people do choose to do this. And then, like you said, I do think the responsible, you know, polluting thing to do is to, even if you're going to go down that path, you're like quite certain, you know, whatever about what it is you want to do, put it in the drafts. Thing. Don't hit send, right? So that I think is that is a really interesting path. Put in drafts folder, or whatever platform it is, Twitter, email, whatever else, and then you have some human oversight, right? And we talk about that, and maybe you just hit send, and that would be kind of probably the shortest path if all this stuff is like engineered and everything else. Okay. The other thing you could do, like you said, is, okay, maybe you summarize it, and then there's like aggregation, which is kind of interesting. It's like and actually these three things, I would actually put these as potentially separate. So there's summarizing like a single piece of content.
Yeah.
And bringing that to your attention. And this is something I do like ad hoc. Like the podcast thing, for example.
Yes.
I listen to a whole podcast in like probably like at least a year at this point, maybe one, but it's relatively rare. And so what I do instead is somebody sends me a YouTube video or a podcast, like I will pop that into one of my favorite tools. I'll just like pull up here is youtubetranscript.com.
Yeah.
You can just copy and paste the link in, you get the transcript out of it. And I don't know why this thing's so slow. Oh, there we go. So like, I'll show you just a quick example of this. I don't know, what's the topic you're really curious about right now?
Let's say line graph. So like agentic workflows that work like graphs.
Okay. Line graph would be the.
Yep.
Okay. So here we have, so what I'll do actually, this is like one of my little tricks, is I do long form and then I look at the most recent ones.
Okay.
And the reason why I like to do this, so let's do one. So this has 212 things, views, whatever. Put that in here. We get the transcript. Oh, that's interesting. YouTube is blocking us from fetching subtitle. Okay. Well, maybe there's a.
I was gonna say, because I've tried to scrape some of these before. Or I shouldn't say that because you're not allowed to scrape YouTube. But yes, they will block you from generating some.
Oh, that's crazy. It might be as recently, actually. I wonder if because I had this working yesterday. If Google just brought down the hammer on one of my favorite tools.
Possibly. I think it just depends on the video. Try to pick another one.
Yeah, we'll try this one. Let's see. I've never seen that particular error before though, which is kind of interesting. But I have a workaround. So
great. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, give it 1 second.
The last few months I've been.
That's crazy. Yeah, it looks like it's so there was a Python library that I used to use. It was like YouTube something that would pull the subtitles. Let's try this one more time. Oh man, I think it might be totally broken. Let's try it. Okay. Breaking news. YouTube, Google is wised up to. Let's see if this works.
Well, in the world where everybody and their mother is trying to train an LLM, that's probably a good thing to do.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do instead. There's a great application called, that's interesting. This one seems to be working. Okay, this one seems to be working.
Okay.
YouTube. Okay, so Note GPT. I guess I'll just keep that in mind now. They're using something else. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to Claude. And I just pasted this in here.
Okay.
And I'm actually, because the transcript of our whole conversation is going, I'm going to copy and paste the whole thing. Oops, didn't copy that. Let's try it again. There we go. Let's bring this up. So my name's Christian. I'm working with another guy named Christian, who we were both classmates at MIT Sloan, which is the funniest thing. And we're both now AI indie consultants. And the other Christian is particularly interested in writing a blog post about LangGraph, which is a new piece of technology. Could you please read the transcript of a video that I'm sharing with you that's about this technology very closely and tease out things? Well, actually, I want you to come up with two things first. The first is a very brief summary with kind of key takeaways. And then I want you to list out any particularly interesting, attention-grabbing, contrarian, counterintuitive, bold assertions or insights contained in the transcript, if they're in there, and for each one, give a supporting quote and explain why it caught your attention. So
I could tell you've gotten really good at this stuff.
Yeah,
prompting is like magic.
It's, I mean, yeah, I'm just
nice.
And by the way, just to show this here, I'm using a tool called Super Whisper, which is like one of my favorites.
Okay.
I am, if you're familiar with like the Twitter sort of, slang on this, I'm definitely a word person.
Nice.
So being able to use dictation for everything has been really useful. And you can see it does like automated formatting, state of the art, works on Mac and iOS. But what it's going to do now is it's, using Claude 3 Opus, which as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to verbal intelligence, is state of the art.
Agreed.
And it's taking now that video and it's writing this summary with the context too of everything that we've talked about so far. And this is one thing that I've found to be like a general, something that's really important is like, forget the prompt engineering stuff.
Right.
It's all about getting salient, rich context.
Love that.
Right. That's going to take you way, way, way further than like fiddling with XML tags or any of that kind of stuff. Okay, so as we're looking at this, I'd be really curious, is there anything that catches your attention?
So you scroll all the way up.
Yeah.
So he's creating Jared, an open source AI research agent, built using LangGraph. Let's see, long running research tasks. Okay. Requirements gathering, all this stuff. Open source agent. So I guess one thing that's, sticks out is, so we're building some of basically an agent here, or an agentic workflow, and he's comparing it to Claude, which isn't really the same thing. Like Claude would be a node in that graph, so to speak. I'm not sure if that's that's because the person in that video represented things that way, or if it's glitch in the understanding of the AI. But maybe, well, actually look at the quote. So that it doesn't actually say anything about Claude. So I'd be curious if the person in the video actually brought that up, or if it was Claude's own assessment. Meta prompting at a high level is where we get the meta expert to write prompts. This is a very interesting strategy that I've seen, is like, we get an LLM to write prompts that work for LLMs. And there's someone in my network who I met years ago who's working on something similar. He reached out recently. And essentially his company will route your prompt to the best model that they think is equipped to handle it. And then basically it's gonna spit out an answer. So that way you get pretty much the best outcome. And they've done the routing, so you don't see what's going on under the hood. Or maybe you do. I'm not sure. I haven't actually spent a lot of time with the tool. But essentially, like, the magic is, you've given me a coding task, and I know for a fact that Claude 3 Sonnet is the best model for coding. So under the hood, what I'm going to do, I'm going to route your prompt to Claude, get the answer, get it back to you. Maybe more complicated than that, but that's the general idea. And if you compare the performance of a pipeline that looks like this to any one model, it generally does better.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
Idea of meta prompting here, I guess, are similar along the same lines.
So would it be fair to say that's something that's kind of cutting edge, that I don't know, is maybe worth. I mean, what you just said was really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then let's look, we'll quickly go through and keep talking. Just whatever comes to mind, just say it.
All right, let me see what else. Jared is far from perfect. I mean, that's everything. Yeah, that's so one thing that comes to mind here is like, I know not many people are putting agents into production yet, or agentic workflows, and that's, for several reasons. I think they tend to break, and you can build in retries. For example, if you try to hit a tool and it breaks, it doesn't work. There are frameworks, or you can write a framework that tries again, but that gets prohibitively expensive. I think, as we get cheaper and cheaper models like GPT-4o Mini, for example, and as we get better models, I think cheaper and better makes it more likely that we're going to see these. And I have zero doubt in my mind that we're going to see agents doing things in the background for us in the future. But I think we need to have cheaper models that allow us to kind of fail and try something more than once without having to pay a lot of money. And then two, there's another dimension, which is like model quality, which means like, you get better models, you're less likely to make a mistake. You're less likely to have to try more than once to get the outcome that you desire. So I think, whichever way we go, hopefully we go in kind of both directions. We progress on both axes. That's going to make it more and more likely people are going to start putting more agents in production. And I think, so going back to like LangGraph and agents and agentic workflows, people have thought about these workflows in different ways. Initially, LangChain had or was built around agents, which is an LLM, a bunch of tools, and a system prompt. So like a system prompt that tells the LLM, act like, X persona. You have access to ABC tools, and what that means is essentially you give a description of the function that the LLM can call, and then what the LLM is going to do is whenever it thinks that it needs to call a weather API to get you the weather, or a news API to get news about a certain keyword that you asked about, it's going to write that as instructions. And then what LangChain does is it sees the instructions, it evaluates the instructions, gets the answer, feeds it back to the LLM. So the LLM thinks that it was the one that actually pinged the weather API, or it was the one that actually pinged the news API to get the news, where in fact that evaluation happened on your machine based on instructions that the LLM sent. So you're saying that it has access to weather data, for example, APIs. That's how all of these Zapier automations work. So that was the first kind of like, if you want, framework that LangChain started building around, and that still exists. I think those are called agents and agent executors. What they've moved towards now is LangGraph, which is you don't have one agent. What you have is a graph of nodes, and those nodes could be agents, they could be tool executors, and there could be solid edges between the nodes. So for example, you start off at node 1, you may call a tool, and then regardless of the outcome, you go to node 2. And then at node 2, there might be a solid edge to node 3 and a conditional edge to node 4. So depending on the outcome of whatever calculation you made there, or whatever function you evaluated, you might decide to go this way or that way. So it's more flexible. Going to build workflows that have solid edges. So you want to start here and move there regardless of what happens.
Yeah.
Or you want to build in like more conditional, like if this evaluates to true, then move here. If not, move there. So this gives you way more flexibility on the agent workflow. There's a third and very popular workflow, and it's the Crew workflow. And if you've heard of Crew AI, it's caught fire. The guy who developed it is an absolute genius. Not to say that the LangChain people aren't, but the framework there I find is more is easier to understand, right? Because what you have is you have a bunch of agents. They can delegate tasks. So for example, in this example, you might have an agent that checks whether a piece of content is relevant, right? That might be one agent. Another agent would be the agent that, or could be the agent that summarizes the piece of content if it is indeed found to be relevant. That you might have a third agent that reads that summary and then reads other pieces of content that you've written before in your own voice, and then creates a post. And then you might even have a fourth agent that puts it in your drafts. And you can orchestrate them, quote unquote, sequentially or in parallel, right? But you can't do both, and you don't have the flexibility of conditional edges and direct or solid edges, as I described with line graphs. So it really depends on your use case. I mean, I think I'm going off a tangent here potentially, but there's many ways you can build these things, and this is something I've been thinking about very much recently.
Clearly. So what's really cool is I just recorded all that into using Super Whisper. I could also pull it from Otter.
Okay.
But everything that you just like unloaded a huge amount of like original content and contended with it, right?
Yes.
And this, just getting back to you, it'll take a second to like do this in post or whatever. So I'll come back to it in a moment. But I just wanted to show, that only took a few minutes.
Yes.
For you to make that contribution. And so here, summarize with insights / interesting anomalies. A little pattern that I found is it's almost like having this asynchronous conversation, which is a weird way to think about it. But it's like, you bring a mastermind group together, or like whoops. I'm just gonna paste that in here. So I just got your everything.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like you're having this asynchronous conversation with this guy, right? Yeah. Some of the ideas. And it's, there'd be some misses because, it's kind of a strange thing. Like if you really think about what's going on, is like you're articulating what would be private thoughts in a live conversation and doing it across space and time.
Yeah.
But like, I think in reality, what's going on is like, if you model the information, you are like a high quality post that comes out of this is actually a function of something similar to what would happen if you talk to him. But we're substantially decreasing the coordination costs of doing that.
Yeah.
And so you can still hone in on something's useful, but you're just like pulling that outcome to the present rather than having to spend all this time and energy trying to facilitate the conversation. And then you can escalate it to something live. But it's like doing it in this way, I just think it, and I found in my experience, like it's kind of like a way of, up leveling what you would end up producing. So here's what I want to do. I'm literally just going to put that into Claude now, everything that you just said. And then we're going to do some interesting stuff, because what I want to get to is by the end of this, you have posted something on LinkedIn, if you'd be open to it.
Sure.
Okay. And I can keep past the top of the hour, if I don't know if you can, but
let me see. Actually, it's funny, if you go back to point 1, we're going to read this, but going back to point 1, it's telling me that I'm correct, that the comparison was not made.
Yeah, that's part of the thing that's still not been solved, is like, even that I don't totally trust.
Yeah.
Because it can be kind of sycophantic.
Exactly.
When you push back on it, it's like, oh, I did make a mistake, but it didn't, like.
Yes, I hear you. But then one other interesting thing is, I feel like there's some element, or there could be, I don't know that for a fact, in the system prompt for Claude Opus, it could be that they've asked it to like market itself, or like talk about Claude or Anthropic whenever they get, or maybe it's potentially, but that's the impression that I get, right? Like that's what I see in a lot of my interactions with AI. It's generally like they're going to talk about the company that, whatever, Anthropic, OpenAI.
Okay. So this did a pretty good job of, I would say a decent job of summarizing what you said.
Right.
Now, here's where it gets interesting is, great, thanks for doing that. I would to author of the original video, and I want you to ask 3 hyper precise, hard hitting, no punches pulled follow-up questions that act as invitations for me to take the quality of my thinking about these various things to the next level. You can be curious, be attentive. Yeah, I want you to really think hard about this, and you can look at the context of everything that I've shared in the conversation so far and ask those hyper precise follow-up questions that really get at whatever gaps remain in terms of understanding or things that you're curious about across what we've covered thus far. Let's think it through step by step to get to the right answer. Okay.
You gotta pull the chain of thought at the very end.
I mean, why not, right? You know, it's like I'm still like kind of superstitious about some of these things, even though it's going on in the background, right?
No, it does work. Like I'm
not convinced, but like I am definitely superstitious. Like even in the prompts that I show people, I'm like, you are an expert, whatever, with an IQ of 120. Like that one always like throws people for a loop. I don't know if it actually does anything at this point, but like it, you know, I'm just so used to doing it. Okay.
Okay, let's see. Question 1.
So what I'd like you to do now is read this and then choose one question. Choose one question that you're like, wow, that really is sparking some thought.
It's definitely not one because, well, it could be one, but I found that I was relevant to Jared, so I was like,
don't think about it too much. Just trust your gut. Like whatever is like, that's energizing to me. That's the one.
One sec, let me just read through them. Dude, both 2 and 3 are really good. Like I don't know if I don't know if I can pick one. I think so. Let me talk about question 2. I think what really stood out there is the issue of compounding errors, right? So if and this is a pretty salient point, right? Like we're talking about meta prompting and selecting the best model to answer a prompt. But what if we're not selecting the model? We're selecting like an entire workflow, or like a number of models that. So there's like another way of processing output is like, you know, potentially generating the same output from different models and then having like a summarizer at the very end summarize the output. So there's multiple ways to generate output from LLMs. That's not just, you know, feeding it to one model and then expecting the output. So that makes it way harder to evaluate or to build these things, because you have potential compounding errors, you have more complex systems. So that's a pretty salient point in my view. And then question 3, I think, you know, it's going back to like human AI collaboration, which is a huge point. Like, you know, some things you might want to automate because nobody likes doing them, because if you take them off of people's plate. But I think if you do enough work, people, you know, that work at like maybe in a larger company, I would say that this is probably like enterprise level where things are very like people have very atomic tasks that they're used to doing. If you take something off their plate, even if it's, you know, something that they hate doing, they might feel like, okay, like they might start questioning if what they bring to the table, I guess, is one way to put it. Right. So that's another one, I think. So both 2 and 3 are, raise pretty good points in my view.
Yeah. And any do you want to respond to them anymore?
Sure. Let's say I think to question 3, I think there's 2 critical factors. One is like change management as it relates to human AI collaboration. Like there needs to be a new mindset of like, okay, these things exist. We're going to use them. How do we use them optimally to achieve better efficiency, I guess, in what we do at the organizational level, but also how do we make humans comfortable using these tools, and how do we reassure them that they're not basically going to and that the thinking is to actually supercharge them or supercharge their processes and allow them to do more thinking, more high quality, high leverage activities, as opposed to like the menial stuff that AI can take into or do it AI can do, right? So that's one. And then another one, it didn't really mention this specifically, but I think it might have been referring to it, like security is another another critical factor that needs to be in place, right? That's the number one thing that I talk about with all of my clients, like security. How do we make sure our data isn't being shared with Anthropic or OpenAI? And it'll differ from client to client. Some clients are kind of more, everybody wants their data to be secure, but some clients are more open to sharing some data with OpenAI as long as they go through Azure, for example, because that makes it so like OpenAI can't train on their data. Like we've talked about this so many times, but that's another one that I think is crucial.
Okay, cool. So what we're gonna do now is where it's gonna get fun. Coming back to, it'll take a second to load that up.
Okay.
But what I would like to get to is you're working to make a meaningful contribution in the conversation. And of course, everything that we're doing right now, like this is kind of how I try to work with folks, is like use the general purpose tools to get the process figured out as quickly as possible.
Right.
And but ultimately it's always coming back to this outcome of like, can you make a meaningful contribution to the conversation? And so what I want to do now is you just answer that. I'd be really sad if that doesn't work. 1 second. Okay. So here we have one text thing. Can you tell me about your, like, if you could get the attention and kick off a conversation with anybody, maybe it's like your ideal customer profile or something like that, through a LinkedIn post, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe who that person is?
Yes. At this point in time, they're probably an executive at a startup, or a director or VP at a middle market company. And they either have a very clear idea of a system that they want to build. So, because I do custom software development, that's one thing. Or another thing, they want help with, just in general, generative AI strategy. So like what models to use, what trade-offs are involved if they go for this technology versus that technology. And they want kind of more higher level strategic and like road mapping help.
Any particular industry or anything like that?
So far, I've been working across industries. I would think, not tech, because usually, people in that sphere are pretty plugged in, and they're less likely to hire somebody to help them with Gen AI if they're the ones that are developing the stuff or are really working closely with it. So you can call it maybe traditional industries. I know that's a broad term, but basically the universe minus tech, pretty much.
Okay. I'm so used to moving like so fast with this stuff at this point, I get like very impatient. All right, so here's what we're gonna do as well, all right? So we're gonna take a bunch of your recent posts. And this, I'm just gonna do it myself, but like you can do you have any like meaty ones that I can just copy and paste in? Or this one's fine.
Yeah, maybe. Sure. I haven't been posting a lot recently, so. Mostly reposting people.
No worries. And then any like really long comments are kind of useful as well. This is like kind of an optional step, but
I definitely don't. You're not gonna find anything there. I won't post long comments.
no worries. All right, so I'm just gonna get rid of that then. What I would do then is, we could take like some previous ones that you've done. There's also a kind of I thought I lost it for a second. There's kind of a cool tool. I've tried it once. The results were like pretty good. I would say I got 80% the way there. This thing called Spiral, which is developed by this guy Dan Schipper, he's got a pretty big YouTube following. He does type stuff.
Nice.
Sort of helps with this. But yeah, it's like you can take a bunch of your old posts and then it just streamlines the workflow a little bit, what we're doing live. Okay, so what I'm gonna say is, great. Now you are an expert marketing copywriter with an IQ of 120. I'm going to give you the following, a substantial response to one of the questions above, as well as the sort of like target audience person that you'd be writing for. And I want you to write a really high quality, compelling sort of post that we'd put on LinkedIn, but no emojis, no like kind of silly stuff. It's just like very muscular, high quality prose that is speaking to that particular persona. Lots of white space. The goal here is to make a unique contribution to the conversation, based on what I'm telling you. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm just going to copy and paste.
I love how you told them not to use emojis, because I think it defaults to that if you tell it like it's a LinkedIn post. That's
ChatGPT definitely.
ChatGPT, yes. Exciting news with the rocket emojis.
Oh, dude, the worst. It's really interesting. My otter is just like coming in and out. Feels like a lot of word salad.
It does.
This is making me sad. All right. Make this more succinct and have it be based on, or maybe some key insights that somebody who fits this ideal persona would want to consider, or maybe like key questions that they would ask and why each one of those questions is important if they're thinking about like agentic workflows, but have it be based on the material that I shared with you. Bullet points, very short sentences, like none of this word salad stuff. Okay, just interpreted that literally. Oh man, I'm gonna be. This is the thing is like what drives me nuts is sometimes it just works, and then sometimes it's like it spits out the word salad.
It's also trying to rate limit you.
I've got 6 messages left. Yeah. Okay, let's try again. Can you please draft a post that again has white space between every sentence? You use a few bullets where appropriate, and it's written for, you know, one of these prospects, maybe a CEO of one of these companies that's curious about agentic workflows. It's like here's what they need to know, and then have a compelling hook at the beginning.
I think once you nail down the prompting, this becomes easier. But you got to put in the reps a few times initially.
Yeah, you absolutely have to do it manually. This is one of the reasons, though, why I'm personally a little bit skeptical about some of the agent stuff, because even when you're doing it manually, there tends to be so much variation that, like, I always like this is honestly, I think, a little bit better.
Yes. And sorry, just to go back to your point about agentic workflows and so I would say it depends on the level of like creativity that you want to give to the to your agents. If you're trying to determine whether a certain piece of text implies something or not, like if it's a Boolean outcome, if it's a yes or no, if you're trying to extract sentiment, and like sentiment can be either like positive, negative, or neutral. I'm not talking about like a whole spectrum. You can use agents for those kind of things, as long as you put the right guardrails.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, and that's where like, so just coming back to the picture, like I've found this part of it where it's like I want it to take huge amounts of stuff that I would never read.
Yes.
And tease out the things that I actually want to kind of wrap my hands around and like think about deeply, just like you did right now.
Yep.
It's really good for that side of it, but then you got to like do the work. I think that part of it's like kind of important, and that's what begets quality. And then on the other side of it, then it's like, okay, I can kind of work with it in this way to start getting it in the shape that I want, and then also have it. Well, maybe we'll do one round of this or something like that, but have it ask you questions as a follow-up to continue boosting quality. So first of all, like, is this closer to being a draft?
I would say so. I just going back to that point that you were making earlier about like the second part of this pipeline being more complex and more difficult. Totally agree. I think one interesting thing that I've seen people do is having like LLMs as a judge. If you have like a rubric for what constitutes a good post, then you can kind of write it out, and then you can have another, here's the post. Do you like it? If you don't, can you tell me how to fix it? And then you put that in a loop until the judge says this is good to go. So you can automate that. What we're doing now is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. So you can have like a critic.
Yeah.
One of the challenges, though, I found is doing that programmatically is pretty tough. And this might be a limiting belief that I have. But I find that, like, you notice when I do the prompting, like, I'm putting a lot of stuff in, but like relatively fast.
Yes.
I'm constantly trying to incorporate little bits of contextual things.
Sure.
And like, I prefer always having the control ability to make that a little bit different versus encoded.
That's a good point. I mean, you might end up, stabilizing, I guess, in this process somewhere where you don't necessarily want to be, and you want to have that subjective element.
Yeah, and a little bit of that is also just like me, like that's like clearly like empirically people are able to do things that are not that, but that is just kind of a quirk I have, is I like having the control and the oversight, just because you can go so fast as well. So the other thing I was going to say is, okay, let's do, so then there's like draft. And then just to your point about the critic thing, we're going to do this right now. So like this actually becomes pretty interesting, I think. Simulated critic. So if you have a good idea of like, what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve here?
Yeah.
Meaningful contribution to the conversation, but at least like the assumption I made about asking the about the ICP is like, you would want to get the attention of that particular prospect and have them believe in you, interact with it, like it, reach out, right? Something like that. So what I would say is, all right, great. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the profile that we outlined earlier. And I want you to take a look at this draft and output the percentage likelihood that you would reach out to Christian in a private DM to get his thoughts on this particular topic as it relates to your business, from 0 to 100%. Before you give me the final score, only do this at the end of your response. I want you to think it through step by step to ultimately get to the right answer.
I think I see where you're going with this. I like it.
Yeah. I really want to get to the point that I really hope this ends up working. But yeah, let me just share this with you. Okay. Okay, now here's where it gets interesting. What would have to be true instead for you to be at 90%? I want you to think that through step by step, and then ultimately come up with your answer and finally reformat those answers into questions that the author might be able to proactively answer and incorporate into another draft that would boost the percentage. So this way, like, you're using counterfactual reasoning. It's like, question, what would have to be true? You identify the gaps, and then you can act on it by getting the information. Or now I'm trying to do multiple things and like a sync. We'll see how well it works, but I'm also almost out of messages here.
I think that forces us to get it right. Let's see.
Yeah. Specific concrete examples, always good. ROI, yeah. So it's more, yeah. Call to action. So what I want you to do now, just in the interest of time, is read each one of these questions aloud and then give an answer, or just skip. Just rapid fire go through. If you need to stop, that's fine, but I want you to go through live now and just do that.
So you said you want me to answer all of them, or just one, right? Just one?
No, just go through. Do as many as you can.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, number one. So what sets your expertise and approach apart from other experts in the field of agentic workflows and AI strategy? I think it's the fact that I've been working with, I think I've helped at least 10 clients in the past year develop AI strategies and determine the stack they need to use, figure out what LLMs they need to use, and also understand the trade-offs involved in that. And I think that kind of also hits on point 2. In my specific industry, well, I've worked across a number of industries. Software so SaaS is one of them, enterprise SaaS, education is another, finance is a third, and energy is a fourth over the past year. What are some concrete examples of the impact or ROI that your guidance has delivered for other companies, and how might these benefits or those benefits translate to my organization? Well, I've done things from like help companies completely automate workflows to create chatbots that increased user retention or customer retention. What specific next steps or offerings can you provide to help me get started with assessing and implementing agentic workflows in my business? Well, I offer free strategy calls. You can book them with me directly. Let's see.
We're to get this right on the mark. We're going to run out of messages and then. So my read on this is it basically just, it took your answers and it didn't really include so much of the content. Yeah, compelling from the first draft. This is just icing on top. You can weave in. And this is one of these weird things where like, I keep coming back to this, is it's like working with a person. Like you really, it's, I don't know, I'm like too averse to operational things, but I can already tell this is a little bit better.
Yes.
This is pretty good.
I like that. Not bad.
So I have one prompt left. What do we want to do with this?
I probably distill it, make it a bit more succinct.
Make it more succinct?
Yeah.
Make it better and a bit more succinct.
Yeah.
It's not bad. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to share this in a Google Doc with you right now. This is that's a short version, and then I'll just do a line break to the
long version.
Long version.
I love what the title it gave to that conversation. Classmates turned AI consultants.
That's pretty funny. All right. Christian LinkedIn post on agents. And then, one of the other things too that is kind of interesting is like you can, I gotta shoot that over. So you have this like critic, and the key here is you're doing like probability scores toward uncertain outcome plus counterfactual gap analysis questions. It's kind of like key there. And of course, this is, it's like you've seen that meme about like draw the rest of the owl. Like then you got to put the finishing touches on it, right? And a couple of things that I would highlight is that original video, that guy who posted it, like somehow like sending the post follow up to him and being like, hey, like this was actually inspired by some content that you created.
Yeah.
Or engaging with him, or, you know, if you really want to go for it, you can just like tag him and say like, or hat tip in the comments to so-and-so who's, you know, YouTube video got me thinking about this, or something like that.
Nice.
You know, tagging other or reaching out or whatever is just something you can do too. So that's the back end, but
cool stuff, man. This is great.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you have this running?
Well, not this, but something. Yeah, let me show you.
All right.
And of course it's gonna break, but let's try. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah.
Here now. Okay. All right. So I've used Crew AI to build this, and it's pretty simple and intuitive, even if you're not a programmer. It's easy to understand what's going on here. So the first thing that I did here was define my agents. I called it an AI content analyst, and its goal is to accurately identify documents that are related to a technical aspect of AI. Anything that has like a technical aspect to it, it's going to respond with a yes, and then we're going to move forward. And if it doesn't, it's just going to ignore it.
Yep.
Second one.
Zoom in just a little bit.
Sorry, say that again.
Can you zoom in just a little bit?
Yes, I can try to do that.
Thanks.
Is that working? I can't really tell because sorry, one sec. Not sure.
If you do Command plus, it should zoom in.
Nah, it's not working.
Oh shoot. Okay, no worries. I can kind of see it.
Okay. So the second thing is, or the second agent is the document summarizer, and I mean this is pretty rudimentary, but we can certainly bake in more, at least prompt engineering here to get it to what we want it to look like. Now it's just like a pretty, pretty bare bones thing that just does summaries. And then the last one is I'm using Notion to kind of catalog all of this. So the last agent is the Notion uploader. So these are the three agents that I have in this workflow. And then the other thing that you need to determine or define is the tasks. So process document is the first task, which is really just checking the document to see if it's related to a technical aspect of AI. The second one is related to summarizing, and the third one is just uploading to Notion. And then the last part is the tool that uploads to Notion. So just defining kind of where things go without going too deep into it. And then the main function here is that the part that orchestrates everything. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating as I said before, I'm pulling or crawling. So I'm crawling, and this is out. And then for each document in those documents that I crawled, I am then kicking off the workflow, checking if it's relevant, if it is, summarizing, and then pushing to Notion, and then moving on to the next document. So this is kind of how this works. And then if you kick it off, you get this question: what is the website URL you want to scrape?
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna find one real quick and go to here. We can use this one. And then let me see. Hopefully this works.
And that's going to automatically put something into your Notion.
Yes.
That's cool. Okay.
If it works, it will. Okay, so it's taking some time. It's supposed to start streaming output here.
Nice. Okay.
Okay. So we can read through these in a second. I think it's trying to push and it's running into issues. Okay, let me pause this and then we'll read through what happened, because that's still, I think that's still interesting and useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so
Right?
walk through what's going on.
So this is the first agent is the AI content analyst. This is the first agent that's going to see this content. Basically, it looks like it's Markdown. If you know Markdown language, you can quickly realize that that's what it is. And then, so the final answer for the first agent is, yes, this is related to a technical aspect of AI. And then it says why.
Okay.
And so this next agent is the technical AI writer, which is supposed to create a and I think there's an error here because we're not passing the relevant document. That's what's going on. So you can see it, this is still like in template form. It should fill this out with the content, and I can go back and figure out why it hasn't done that. So what it did here is because it knows what the content is about.
Yeah.
It came up with something, right? But this is a hallucination. This is what basically it knows that it talks about. The document talks about few shot prompting. It hasn't seen it yet, but it wrote something. So that's the first error. And then, yeah, summary didn't get populated here. And then we got the error of like trying to push to Notion. I got to do some more debugging here to understand what's going on. But I got it to work yesterday. I've introduced a small change today that broke it. But
can you roll it back?
Yes. Let me see. So I think I just added the URL here.
And then do you have this running? Like, are you running this ad hoc, or do you have a job, like a recurring job?
No, it's completely ad hoc. Just give me a second. Let me try to find that URL. Okay, so it's not here, probably here. Okay, so ensure the title and content. Okay, and this is fine. Going back to Notion tools. Okay, I don't need the URL anymore. Let me get rid of it. Okay. And then going back to Notion. Let me get rid of the URL field. Although this will still work regardless, I think. Okay. Let's try this again. Okay, fingers crossed. So yes, it's related to AI. Okay, so it got pushed to Notion. So I actually think this is maybe the template that is being It's being printed here. Maybe there's not an issue. But let's confirm. Can you see Notion?
I can't. Can you? I think you might need to share like your whole screen or something.
All right, let me try it.
Thanks.
So this just happened right now.
Yep.
And I think the date is like maybe UTC or some other time zone. That's why it's 7:32 right now. It's 11, or when it wrote was 11:32. Okay. So there's a problem with the time zone, but otherwise, we got the summary. So this is working. I think there's a few things that I would love to do. One, implement like a smarter scraping strategy that determines that a page has been scraped, so we don't, spend all that money scraping things we've already, scraped or crawled. Two, I think, so if you've already summarized something and you get something that's, pretty close to it in content, what you can do is you can also like compare the vectors. This is more complicated and more involved. But what you could do is you can maybe keep things that are in the same bucket, or maybe tag posts. Add a tag. There's a bunch of things you can do with this. So
in that case, it's like you're almost doing like a diff check between the two, exactly. And it's like, okay, the stuff that's most dissimilar is what we want to keep.
Exactly.
Because in some ways, it's like you're colonizing a part of latent space.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And then I would like to add the URL for me to be able to refer to it. So which is not something that I was able to do.
And would this would go into a blog post, or how would you think about this?
So if we are able to bake in something that generates a more engaging content, then potentially, but like right now this is spam.
Right. So you do need some human in the loop who's gonna oversee this.
More thoughtful, I guess, or I guess, or maybe like it doesn't need to be a human in the loop, but like what we just did now, the whole like back and forth with the AI, that's maybe what we need here, like some sort of like more involved way of like generating content, and not just summarizing one article.
Yeah, but each slice of, and just to make like a meta comment on this, like this is very much what I've seen how this stuff works in practice, is like you have to be rapidly experimenting, and then you figure out, okay, these like different slices you want to delegate, and then you want to like fully delegate, so it's like programmatic or automated.
Yeah.
Have the right parts of it, like kicking up exceptions for you to attend to. And I got to imagine, right? Like this isn't totally new. Like I think about I don't know, like one of the great Renaissance painters, or you think about like Matt Iglesias, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not writing everything they do. They have like these massive, things, but somehow they figured out a process where their aesthetic intuition, or like their taste, their good judgment is continuously being incorporated in sort of the right places.
Exactly.
And figuring out how to design a system that does that is it's definitely an art.
Yeah, no, 100%. There's definitely an artistic component to it. And I think at the very end of the pipeline, there also needs to be like human supervision, because like I wouldn't trust any AI system to post on my behalf, even if I have that whole creative process. If you want it down, I would still want to like okay, do I agree with this? Does this make sense? Because otherwise, it's just too dangerous. Like imagine you're giving your alias to some like AI to be able to post on your behalf. That's not something that I think anyone in our generation is going to be comfortable doing. Maybe our kids' generation, AI is going to be so pervasive that they might be comfortable with something like this. But I don't think I don't think I'm comfortable.
Yeah, and I think that that gets to kind of an interesting, I think, philosophical point about, it's like the quality versus quantity
right
aspect of this. And like my my personal stance is more on the quality extreme, where I think one of the advantages of AI is you can wrap your arms around significantly more data than you ever could have previously.
Yes.
And so, you know, like what we did with pulling that YouTube video, where things get really interesting, I found, and this pushes the limits of what the even the most advanced models can do. You can take like 5 videos. So we found a bunch of long form ones, take 5 of those, put them all into the context window, and use that similar to how we did to find like the most interesting pieces and parts across all of them, and try to you know, really think through, how do I weave all this stuff together into something that's like novel, and then respond to it. The ironic part though is, once you get to that point where you're just like, you found this stuff that could be good raw stuff, AI is almost completely useless. Like you have to literally go for an hour-long walk and think about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's fair. It's a fair point.
That's just sort of what I'm case. But cool, man. So this was fun. I to bring it back to sort of the top. So we looked at like, okay, if we go back, it's like the outcome, and I sort of retrofit this. Whoops, sorry, Siri is perking off. The idea here was we wanted to demonstrate like, how does this sort of AI integration process work in practice? What does it look like when practitioners are actually, you know, doing this kind of rapid experimentation and making things? And then like as a means toward that end, you know, you being armed with some content to post on LinkedIn, hopefully. We had a bunch of different ingredients: Claude, Crew, Firecrawl, Super Whisper, Otter. Is there anything else? Langchain, right?
I didn't I didn't have it. No, not in my stack.
Okay. And then constraints.
Well, I actually used not Claude, but OpenAI's GPT-4 Mini for this.
And was that for the relevance?
So that was for everything.
Oh, really? Really?
Yes.
Mini actually did that well.
Yes.
Interesting.
Surprisingly, yes.
Wow. Okay. That's really interesting. I'm gonna have to get into that more. Okay. Cool. And so as far as next steps go, you can totally say no, but I'm curious, like, do you think that LinkedIn post is good enough that you would want to put finishing touches on it and post it?
Yes, I'm going to, yeah.
Oh, you're going to? All right, cool. And a couple of things that I'll say about this that are sort of interesting, like once you're at this phase, I found with the copywriting stuff, there are a few tools that I at least want to put on the radar. Also, I would like to take our recording and upload it to Loom.
Yeah.
And see if we can capture, I don't know, have people like sign up to view it. Post it on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Would that be right?
Yeah, go for it.
If it catches, we can post it on YouTube or something as well and link back to our pro. I don't know, man. It's just like doing experiments to.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So lex.page is pretty cool. Like once you're at the point where you actually want to do like word processing, it's kind of like incorporating Grammarly, where it's like going to catch all the errors. This is you're talking about kind of the last mile of content production. Lex is a power user tool. Grammarly obviously is really good. The other one, it's still pretty nascent, but it's called Aqua Voice, and it's this YC company. Let me actually pull this up. I'll show you this in real time. It's pretty wild. Let me create a new document. And what I'm going to do here is, here we go. So let's do this. Let's do this. Okay. Okay. The whole thing is voice driven.
Okay.
So just like you're telling like a scribe or somebody to change something, you can literally tell it whatever you want and it'll update the document accordingly.
Okay.
So I'm really curious. I'm going to hit record and start talking to it. If you have like specific direction, it could be, you know, add more white space or numbers instead of bullets, like whatever it is. you can edit documents this way. And these guys are making it faster and faster and making it work. So let's give it a try. All right, so I'll go first. Can you actually make all the bullets numbers, like do enumeration as opposed to bullets? So for some reason, the cursor...
Almost there. What is this cursor thing doing?
I don't know. That's a new feature, actually. I haven't seen that. So there's something.
Like things.
All right, can you please make this enumerate and add some additional white space, and then italicize or bold the words that make the most sense to do so for each line. So instead of doing bullet points. All right, so we don't have to go too deep into this, but it's a cool tool. I think it's one of these things you got to get the reps in. This bringing things into focus thing I had not seen before, but it looks like you kind of do that now.
It's interesting that it you see it's using the markdown bolding thing.
Yes, I did notice that. Which, whoops, I don't even know what that is.
That's funny.
Yeah, where I guess I don't know how they're doing this, but anyway, yeah, it's cool stuff. And then
pretty cool tool, yeah, agreed.
So this is just like another tool in the toolkit, and this is kind of the thing that I've seen is like the foundation models, not dissimilar to using like these IDEs now that are more integrated, right? Yep. So like a Career or you like GitHub Copilot.
Yeah,
you can use the foundation models and like the consumer applications and the transcripts and stuff. I found to kind of like gets you 80% the way, very fast. But there's this conceptual switch that you need to make to using the more like precise tools that still may have AI integrated, but it's about solving those last mile issues.
That's exactly right. And I think bolding here is the perfect example, right? So like if you send this to ChatGPT and ask it to bold the relevant words, I'm pretty sure it's going to use Markdown, right?
Well, it'll use Markdown, but the just like with, if you're using like I had Cursor pulled up, we could, do this or whatever, like doing using Claude or ChatGPT to create the boilerplate code.
Yeah.
It'll walk you through the process of deploying it. Like it'll get you pretty close.
Exactly.
But you have to go in and tweak things.
Yeah. Right. And that's where like I think the productization comes into play, right? Like you're using this ChatGPT thing as a tool, but like how you put the right guardrails in place to make sure that it works in the context of your product.
100%. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to basically take this whole raw recording, put it up in a Loom, and then I'm going to post on LinkedIn, tag you saying, hey, we did all this stuff. If you want to see how this stuff actually works in practice, like,
okay,
it's kind of a new experiment, right? We're doing the show don't tell thing. So we'll do that. You post your LinkedIn post.
Sure.
I'll wait for you to do that. So let me know when you've done it, and then I'll upload this one. And then let me check in like 10 days. I'll set a reminder to do that to see if it makes sense to pop this on YouTube, or if we want to do another one, if you'd be open to it.
Sure.
I think it'd be
absolutely. So
last question I'll ask, I always do this. We've spent almost 2 hours together. You and I are both like quite busy. 0 to 5, 0 being total waste of time, 5 being this was a lot better than you expected. Where are you at right now? I'll give my answer as well.
Okay, I think 4. If I'm being completely honest, I think this exceeded my expectations. I think I love the fact that that I have somebody to kind of I told you this before, like keep me honest, because I've always wanted to create content. I've thought about creating video content. It's great that I'm doing it. I think the one thing that we could have benefited from is maybe like some more preparation. I don't know, like maybe this is gonna work. We'll see if people like it. But I'm just like the kind of person that likes to prepare and do this ahead of time. But
I 100% agree. I think it's worth doing another experiment. I would give it a 3.5.
okay.
So I feel like my guess is we actually probably shared a lot of interesting information that to us seems relatively clear or whatever, because we're so close to it.
Yes.
Probably somebody who's just curious about how this stuff works would definitely spark the creative juices or whatever, because we've done these things so many times. It's like you see and so articulating it, showing it, there's probably a lot of good stuff. I think what it would have taken to get to a 4 or a 4.5 would be exactly to your point. I think if we had a very highly specified outcome,
yes,
that we were collaborating on in real time, where it was like, you and I are going to get this thing done, and like a full end-to-end piece of software, basically, ideally, where you just enter and it does the thing.
Yep.
That would get it to like a 4 or a 5. So I think like if we reconvened and actually like had a full nano hackathon where it's like, we're going to have a script or like something that we can put on Replit, right, along with it, where it's like, put in all the RSS feeds of the podcast that you want to create, an email digest from. It's your code. We're going to create it live.
Yep.
Obviously there's some preparation that we could do, but I think if we had that really specified outcome, then it could have been higher, and it's something we could do in the future. So if you're up, I would love to try that.
Sure. Let's do it.
Cool.
All right.
And we're, again, just to bring it back to the top, not podcasts, forget the storytelling stuff, but if we can create compelling facts in real time, I think that's actually the best fit for this kind of work. So hopefully it resonates.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks for your time, Christian. This was great.
Likewise.
All right. Talk to you.
Bye.